It's my privilege today to be with Rabbi Hanan Schlesinger, the Director of International Relations for Roots, a renowned global Torah educator and leader. Can you tell us a little bit about what Roots is and what exactly you do?
Okay, it's my pleasure to tell you. Roots, we call ourselves Roots Judor Shoashim, the local Israeli-Palestinian initiative for understanding nonviolence and transformation. We work in the heart of the conflict zone. By that I mean what many call the West Bank, Palestinian territory, Palestine, occupied territory. I personally, from my religious beliefs, my Jewish beliefs, I call it Judah and Samaria, because that's what our forefathers have been calling it for the past 2,500 years. So in the West Bank, Judah and Samaria, Palestinians, Israelis, what the media calls Israeli settlers, I'm a settler, we live so close to each other, but so far away. Geographically, we're right on top of each other, but we know absolutely nothing about the other. And what you have is situations of great ignorance, mistrust, of course. You have stereotypes, you have resentment, you have fear, and you have anger, and you have hate. In those circumstances, we're trying to bring the two sides together. That means to see each other, and I almost mean that literally. We really don't see each other. Oh, each side is so much not a part of the narrative and the existence and the truth of the other. We just don't see each other. To bring each side to see each other, to hear each other, to recognize the individual existence and humanity of the other, and then to recognize the narrative and the identity of the other. Bring people together in dialogue that wants to bring us to the place of recognizing the truth of the other side so that eventually we'll be able to live together in peace and reconciliation.
Wow, that sounds like a really heavy task.
It is.
So what inspired you to get into this messy but deeply inspiring work?
So that's a long story, but the short of it is that I was a rabbi in Dallas, Texas for 8 years. That ended about 2 years ago. And there I was involved in interfaith work, first with Christians, later with Christians and Muslims. And I was deeply energized and expanded and inspired by that work of meeting the other, breaking down my own stereotypes, which I did have, and incorporating some of the fervor and the insights and the truth of the other into my own understanding of myself and my people and of Torah. When I went back to Israel, went back home after 8 years in Dallas, this was in 2013 approximately, 2013, I wanted to continue in Israel the interfaith dialogue that I had been so inspired by in Dallas. And I spent a few months searching out dialogue partners and hearing what was going on, what worked and what didn't work. And I came to an obvious conclusion. I should have known better. And the conclusion was that the ground is not ripe, not ready in Israel for interfaith dialogue for the following reason. In America, we all live in the same culture. What separates us is religions. We want to break down the divides, get to know the other as far as his religious identity and his truths. In Israel, we don't have that cultural matrix. So before interfaith dialogue, we have to have intercultural and international dialogue. We have to get to know the other as a human being, his culture and his national identity. Then we can get to religious dialogue. So I realized that before I get to know Muslims or Christians, I have to get to know Palestinians or Arabs. I have to begin at the beginning. So I began to search out, how can I meet Palestinians? And that search eventually changed my life.
We've had a very difficult last 6 months of terrorist attacks in Israel, of daily terrifying news. And in a case of what many have called or questioned as the start of another intifada, what is it like to do this work within this current context of hostility and fear?
Well, look, the work is hard, and the work is now doubly hard. One of the main reasons the work is hard, and now even doubly hard, is because of the atmosphere of fear and anger. Both sides circle their wagons and close in among themselves and fill themselves with more and more anger and fear of the other. Now, the fact that we have this fear and anger is exactly the proof that the work we do in Roots has to be done. It only makes it clearer that the work has to be done, but it's harder and harder because people don't know that they're afraid. No, people know that they're afraid. They don't realize how much their lives and their opinions and their worldviews are colored by their fear and by their anger. So it goes like this. In the present situation of the past 6 months, it's harder and harder to bring the two sides together. Mm-hmm. So therefore, we've curtailed some of our efforts to bring the two sides together, and we focused on two other things. One of them is education of each side among itself. Mm-hmm. My friends, my family, my acquaintances, my neighbors, the settler population of Gush Etzion. By the way, we didn't say that we do all our work in Gush Etzion.
Oh, it is? Okay, interesting.
Yeah, that's a detail we forgot to
mention. I myself lived in Gush Etzion 2 years, so I'm very familiar with the community.
So when I said local initiative, local in the West Bank, in Judah, which is south of Jerusalem, specifically in Gush Etzion. I live in Alon-Shvut, which is the major settlement in Gush Etzion. Mm-hmm. So if we can't bring people together, we can at least educate people about the other. What does that mean? Well, we do Chugei Bayit, which means home meetings. We bring Palestinian activists into my home, into other settlers' home, to speak to a group of 10, 15, 20, up to 40 neighbor settlers. Wow. So it's not 20 Israelis meeting 20 Palestinians. It's 20 or 40 Israelis hearing the story of the Palestinians from someone who lives it.
Right.
And in all of the cases, the people who come to these house meetings are challenged to come, and they're challenged and sometimes hurt by hearing a narrative that's so different than theirs. But it's always respectful. Yeah. It never becomes a shouting match. And that's, I think, thanks to the humanity and the empathy and the charisma of our Palestinian partners. It never becomes a shouting match. It's respectful. A lot of people walk out thinking but skeptical. And some people walk out thinking and energized. There's someone to talk to here. Mm-hmm. I have to learn more. I see so much I didn't know. That there's room. I have to make room in my soul to hear more and to learn more. And they join us. They join our mailing list or our programs of trying to meeting the other side. So one thing we do is the home meetings. Now,
you go to their community also?
Right. That's the exact question has to be asked. And the answer is no.
Uh-huh.
The atmosphere is not able to include that. Uh-huh. We have gone to speak in Palestinian schools in East Jerusalem, but outside of Jerusalem, let's call it the West Bank proper, the villages and the towns, no, we've gone to individual houses and spoken to informally small groups, but to organize in the Palestinian towns, what's been organized in the Jewish settlements, we're not there yet. Mm-hmm. We're really not.
Yeah.
So, wait a second.
Yeah.
The other thing we do, in addition to helping each side hear about the other, even when it's not meeting the other, is strengthening our core leadership groups. So we have about 10 Palestinians and Israelis who are our leaders. If we can't work to bring more and more people into our group, meeting each other now, what we do is just weekly meetings of the core group to really, really get deep into getting to know the other, examining the issues, hearing who they are, what their identity is, hearing their pain, and trying to find room in our soul to expand to include their narrative and their pain and their identity. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So the core group has undergone tremendously powerful and frightening identity expansion. When I say frightening, sometimes we look at each other and we say, how did I go so far in reaching out to understand you and become part of you? It's frightening, but it's also expanding and invigorating, and it's ultimately what spirituality is about.
Beautiful. Yeah. So I know you're not a Navi, but to put on your prophetic hat for a moment, what do you see as the future path towards peace? And are you more or less optimistic since you've started this work?
Okay, so it doesn't require a prophet to talk about what I think is the necessary path.
Yeah.
So in my understanding of the people I work with, the ground is not ready for peace. The Palestinians and Israelis have too much ignorance and stereotypes and have built too many walls.
On both sides.
Both sides, and are not able to see the humanity and legitimacy of the other, not able to see the rootedness of the other in this land. Mm-hmm. So it's not time for peace. Were we to sign a treaty, it would blow up in our faces in 5 days or 5 months or 5 years. What we think has to happen, what we're doing in Roots, is establishing the human groundwork for any future peace plan. So that's the direction, and it's hard, it's difficult, but I don't think there's any choice.
Yeah.
Am I hopeful? There's no reason to be hopeful. There's no reason to be optimistic. But there's a reason to feel a responsibility to do the only thing that can be done and must be done to lay the groundwork for a future solution. So I have a deep sense of responsibility, and that I am doing something that has to be done. So I'll tell you, this is new for me, completely new. When I met for the first time I left Palestinian 2 years and a week ago, it immediately began a trajectory that changed my life. Before that, I held a pretty standard position. It's hard for me today to reconstruct what it was because it seems so off the wall. But it basically was, B'chol dor v'dor omdim aleinu l'chalotenu. In every generation, they stand against us to annihilate us. And the sense was that in some level, our present issues and troubles with the Palestinians, with the Arabs, are part of Jewish fate. That's the way it's always been, that it's hard to be a Jew, that we're always being attacked. And we thought it would be different when we come back to land of Israel. It's not different. We should have known better. That's the way it is. We have to hold on tight. We have to manage the conflict. We have to maintain our strength and our sense of righteousness. And we have to wait until the other side sees the light. That was, I think, close to what I used to think. There's no partner on the other side. There's no humanity on the other side. There's little truth on the other side. I hardly knew there were human beings on the other side, even though it's hard to admit that that's the way I thought. I was unconscious. And when you live in that mindset, it's actually comforting. Because although it's frightening to think there's going to be violence for years to come, but at least you know that this is the way it's supposed to be. Somehow you're part of the large Jewish picture. It's comforting to be part of that narrative. But then what happened to me happened, and I met the people I met, and I thought the thoughts I thought, and I began the work that I'm working, and I saw a different reality. The different reality is this, that what's happening to us, Palestinians and Israelis, is the fault of human beings. Fault of them and fault of us. It could be different. And since it could be different, then I have a responsibility to make it different. That makes life much difficult, because it says, wow, if we behaved differently, people wouldn't be dying as they are. And when I say we, I don't just mean Jews. I mean we and the other side of the we, the Palestinians, that it's up to human beings. So that's really disconcerting and unmooring. It doesn't have to be like this, but it gives a sense, at least to me, a personal responsibility. I can do something, and I have to do something.
Wow. And it's not just, I mean, when we think of those doing this work, it tends to come from the secular sides. The fact that you're coming from a religious side and from within a settlement is really a very new thing. So it's clear what Israelis, well, I shouldn't say it's clear, but we've started to discuss what those over there can be doing. American Jews, what can American Jews be doing to help achieve peace? What could help to accelerate this path towards understanding for those who are over here? I think many feel very paralyzed, very confused, very far away from it. And what advice would you give to?
So I'll back up and answer the question that was implicit in what you began to say in the background. The religious foundations, the Jewish foundations, the work we're doing. So credit has to be given where credit is due. Rabbi Menachem Fruman was really the pioneer and the maverick.
Tekoa, right?
From Tekoa. He was the rabbi of the settlement of Migdal Oz, the kibbutz of Migdal Oz, later the settlement of Tekoa. He is the author, or the spiritual guide for those who understand that we are and must be deeply connected to all of land of Israel, and that includes Judah and Samaria, but that doesn't preclude our searching for peace and a sense that peace must come and can come, and the peace must come and can come from the sources of Torah, from the sources of Judaism. Now, whether one supported or didn't support, or supports or doesn't support the Oslo Accords, we have to put the truth on the table, which is the Oslo Accords were secular Jews making peace with secular Muslims. And the Muslims ignored, they swept under the table the religious elements of this conflict. And the Jews, the Israelis, the secular Jews and Israelis, swept under the rug, ignored the Jewish religious foundations of this conflict. One of those foundations that both sides ignored is the deep connection of Muslims, Palestinians, and the deep connections of Jews to the whole land from the Mediterranean to the Jordan. It's not comfortable for me to say and to recognize that Palestinians have that connection, historically, certainly, and religiously, and it's not comfortable for Palestinians to recognize that Jews have that connection, but that's a fact. By splitting the land on a line and saying, that's yours and that's ours, it actually created Muslim extremism, and I take that back. That's too strong. It didn't create it, it exacerbated it. And it also exacerbated Jewish extremism, because what Oslo was doing was saying to the Muslims, that land over there on the coast is not yours. And it said to the Jews, that land in the heartland, the biblical heartland, Judah and Samaria, is not yours. And therefore, it didn't work. One of the reasons it didn't work, because it marginalized the people who are most deeply connected to the land, Palestinians, Muslims, and Israelis, Jews. What we are searching for in Roots is to recognize the deep historical connection of both sides, of both religions, to the whole land. Now, of course, that makes it harder, but it's the truth. And we won't talk politics, but there is a certain way of squaring the circle. Okay, so then you asked me about American Jews. Well, I would like a situation in which American Jews reached out to their Muslim Americans, fellow Americans, and built bridges of religious understanding in their communities. And I am especially interested in building bridges that are civic, but not just civic, are religious, of interfaith dialogue, of really coming to understand the truth of the other, the narrative of the other. In America today, a lot of this dialogue is going on. I think it's very important. It's important for Muslims, it's important for Jews, it's important for America. I would like to see this dialogue, this interfaith dialogue, prepare the ground for discussions of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. The present situation is that it usually doesn't happen. It's just so charged, that discussion. Even Muslims and Jews really get to know each other. Religiously, they decide very often not to talk about the conflict. I think we have to talk about the conflict, because each side, not just on our side of the ocean, but in America, each side has such a skewed, ignorant view of what the other thinks and what the other knows about the other and what the other thinks about me. It's just so bad. And we sweep all those misunderstandings and ignorance under the table. We don't talk about the elephant in the room, about the conflict. So I'd like to see that dialogue go forward. I'd like to see it develop into dialogue about the Israel-Arab conflict. And I'd ultimately like to see American Jews and American Muslims join hands in searching for a solution in the Middle East. We have Palestinians involved in Palestine advocacy. We have Jews and America involved in Israel advocacy. We have very, very few people involved in advocacy for peace. And just imagine what would happen if American Jews and American Muslims created a model, like a paradigm of we understand the other, we see the validity in the other's claims, and we have a vision of peace in America, but also in the Middle East. That would galvanize us. And the other side of the coin is also true. We see ourselves doing what we're doing in the biblical heartland, in Judah and Samaria, in the West Bank. While we're making peace, trying to make peace there, we want to serve as a model for American Jews and American Muslims to make peace among themselves. our joint front should be a joint front for you, and your joint front, I'm sorry, I didn't say it properly. Our joint front should be a model for you, and your joint front should be a model for us.
Beautiful. You know, I think Levinas had this point right, that just the encounter of face-to-face, that we become responsible, we become transformed just through that relationship. I've experienced that myself in my own interfaith work. My last question for you is, you're not, in addition to being a peace activist, if that's the right term, you're a rabbi and you're an educator deeply steeped in the tradition. And I wonder how the Torah informs, inspires, connects with this work for you. Clearly, it connects for you as it does with all of the other Israelis in your community, that you should be living in the land, your connection to Zionism as a whole. But how does it inform this aspect of relationship building and peace building?
The most oft-mentioned mitzvah, commandment in the Torah, are the commandments concerning the love and concern and the looking out for the other, for the stranger, the sojourner, for the slave, for the widow and the orphan. And all that is founded in the memory of our slavery and our sojourning in Egypt. I understand that the reason that we're commanded again and again and again to remember the Exodus, not just in the Passover Seder, but every day in our tefillot and our prayers, is in order to remind us that we were there, and we should not behave towards others as the Egyptians behaved towards us. One of the foundations of the Torah is that role reversal, that I am the other, and I know how he feels. I know the soul, I know the heart of the other, and I can't do towards him as was done towards us. I don't think there's anything more central in Torah. Mm-hmm. And I realized not much more than 2 years ago that I wasn't living up to that. I'm not talking about the halachic discussions, to what degree are the Palestinians, the Muslims in the category. I'm not going to mention to the viewers the halachic categories, but on a spiritual level, it's clear that one of the major foci of the Torah is to understand, to accept, and to reach out to the other. So that has to be done. That's as far as my concern with the Palestinians. But remember, peace is not just good for the Palestinians. It's a value for us. It's a value for the world. And peace is a Kadosh Baruch Hu's name. It's God's name. For too long, peace has been a dirty word. I don't know if American viewers are aware that peace is a dirty word among in the Israeli religious world.
It means you've compromised on your claims. You've compromised on...
Exactly. Right. Peace is the word that's been co-opted by the quote-unquote leftists, by the secularists. Peace is made by, like I said earlier, by secular Jews sitting in Tel Aviv. That's wrong. That's just cutting out part of our tradition and ceding it to others. Now, I'm happy that it's embraced by many Israelis, but it has to be embraced also by those who feel and claim that the tradition, the whole tradition, is ours.
Yeah. Beautiful. Wow. Thank you. I wish so much bracha and hatzlacha, so many blessings and so much success in the work you're doing. Is there a website people can follow this work you're doing? Is there a Facebook page? How can people connect to what you're doing?
Right. So we'll just mention that we have a Facebook page. At this point, the URL is friendsofroots.net. Say it again, www.friendsofroots.net. And there you can see all the work that we're doing.
Rabbi Hanan Schlesinger, thank you so much.
Thank you. Good.